Hey, everybody. On this episode of iTalk Movies, we're getting up close and personal with director Anders Walter. Let's do it.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's iTalk Movies.
Look at this. The song, Something So Strong, by Rasmus Walter. We'll find out what that connection is in just a little bit. Plays us into this episode of iTalk Movies. This is a show where we get up close and personal with the people both in front and behind the camera to bring you all that great entertainment you get to see while you're sitting in the movie theater, maybe at home on the couch or on your mobile streaming device. I'm your host, Frank Moran. Now, folks, before we get talking to our incredibly fascinating guest, do you like to learn, love, and laugh and grow in all areas of your life? If you do, we've got a podcast just for you. Conversations with Maria Menounos Podcast Edition drops on iTunes every single Friday and is created by our AfterBuzz TV founder, Maria Menounos. Conversations with Maria Menounos features celebrity and influencer interviews talking about life, wealth, fashion, entertainment, everything that you need to know to grow and learn and out in all areas of your life. So make sure you go to iTunes and subscribe to Conversations with Maria Menounos for free. And when you do, tell her it was iTalk Movies that got you there. Conversations with Maria Menounos Podcast Edition. Check it out. Now, my guest today hails from Denmark, got his start in the film world as a storyboard artist, working with a variety of Danish directors, then jumped behind the camera and started directing some short films. In fact, in 2014, his short film Helium won an Academy Award for Best Live Short Film. His feature-length directorial debut happens this weekend. It's I Killed Giants, starring Zoe Saldana, Madison Wolfe, and Imogen Poots, based on the 2008 comic by Joe Kelly and Ken Niamur. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Anders Walter.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for making the trip. I feel like I'm going to say you came all the way from Denmark to talk with me. Yeah, that was it, the only reason. And now flying right back. This is the highlight. Absolutely.
It is the highlight, no matter what, being here, of course.
So, playing us in, a familiar gentleman. Especially if you go to YouTube, you can see the video for Something So Strong, Rasmus Walter. But looks very much like the gentleman that's sitting across from me.
It certainly does. It is my twin brother, but I had hoped we could just pretend it was
right.
me, so I would come across as a very talented guy who could both sing, write, and direct. But
I like that
guess you spoiled that, so thank you. No, it's my twin brother, and he wrote an original song for the film.
So, now, in terms of siblings with you, is it just you and your brother, or are there other siblings as well?
There is an older sister.
Okay. So, growing up, were all three of you kind of influenced had an interest in the arts?
I mean, we didn't grow up together. My sister grew up with my dad, so my parents divorced when we were one. So I grew up with my mom together with my twin brother. But both me and my brother were always very into the arts, and my brother started playing music from a very early age. And right from when I was 6 years old, I knew I wanted to do something that had to do with illustrations and comic books. The whole film thing came a little bit later. So when I was 6, I discovered a very big European comic book called Tintin. Spielberg, of course, did a version of that.
Tintin, that is a great Hergé, correct?
Yeah, I'll say in Belgium, where he's from, they would say Hergé.
Oh, okay, yeah. Excellent. A variety of different novel tomes. So I first got exposed to that when I went to France.
Yeah.
And loved it, but I was always frustrated because since I couldn't read French, all I could do was just look at the fantastic artwork, and I was frustrated. But now they've done English adaptations, so it's been great to be able to read those stories.
But that's probably one of the biggest comic books in Europe, and out of this French-Belgium tradition of doing comic books, which was the scene that I was into. I didn't really... I didn't buy any American comic books when I grew up. So that was the scene I was into. And I wanted to be the new Hergé and have my own big concept like Tintin.
Was your art style, since you were kind of fond of those stories, did you kind of emulate his art style?
Totally. I would sit, every afternoon with transparent paper and just, do drawings on top of the pages in Tintin. So I would do that for a couple of years, and then I would start to do my own stuff, and all the stuff I did in the beginning of my early teen career. People always felt that it looked very similar to the drawing style of Tintin. But then slowly, eventually, I got my own style.
I remember doing the same thing because I grew up loving comic books.
Yeah.
But of course, on this side, just American comic books. But George Perez was an artist that I really enjoyed. Didn't like the Avengers, a lot of Justice League comic books, but I would do much like yourself. I would just trace and draw and try to replicate his style. But as I got older, I just feel like I've been gravitating more towards artists with more of a cleaner line, like an Evan Schreiner who does some comic books now, or a Chris Samney, where it's just a lot more clean lines.
Yeah.
As you've grown older and you've been reading, still keeping up with comic books, I'd imagine, or
Not so much anymore, which is a little bit strange. And to be honest, when the script of I Kill Giants came to me, I didn't know it was based off a graphic novel. I got the screenplay, and it didn't say on the screenplay, or maybe I didn't read it. I just saw a title that I totally fell in love with. I remember getting that screenplay and seeing the title, and I was hoping so much that this would be a great screenplay, because I thought making a movie with this title will just kick so much ass. So I read the screenplay, and then eventually I learned it was based on a graphic novel, which was rather bizarre since I come from this background. So I should have known, but I didn't.
Does your art style still kind of bear a resemblance to? I want to say his name correct. Hirsch?
No, Ashe.
Ashe.
No, not at all. I mean, I did eventually do 2 comic books that were released in Denmark, and also it was translated into French and came out in Belgium and France. But no, my drawing style changed, and I don't know what I would compare it to here in America now. It is still kind of something that springs from a European tradition, and it is very clean in the line work. So maybe you would appreciate it. I should have brought a copy.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm gonna have to be on the lookout for it.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like that is the. I mean, comic books are just such a rich art form that it just, as you're reading those and kind of being inspired by those, does just making the jump to being a storyboard artist seem like just an easy step to get into the world of film?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, there was always something about the whole aspect of making film that intrigued me also when I was a kid growing up. But making comic books, of course, was a very easy way to start telling stories with the images. And when I was a kid in the 80s, getting your hands on equipment to do film and getting money to do film it felt like an impossible dream. So to do comic books, I guess, was another and more easy way to get going in starting to tell stories with pictures. And then from comic books into trying to make a living of doing drawings, because doing comic books in Denmark with only 5 million people, you can't really make a good living off that. So I started doing storyboards for commercials and for Danish feature films, and obviously that also became one more step towards becoming a director, because you do, end up translating a screenplay into images, and you somehow learn the craft of how you cover a scene. Mm-hmm. What I feared the most, and why I think I waited for so long before I actually went into directing, I was 33 when I did my first short film. I was so damn afraid, for the whole human aspect of making a production. One thing, of course, is to be with actors and convince them to do what you're hoping, to achieve. And so there was all of that scared me. And I think because in my 20s, I actually wanted to direct, but I just stayed behind the drawing desk for another 10 years.
Was it more out of fear? Or?
Yeah, I think I was a little bit afraid that maybe I couldn't, I didn't have the capacity in working with a big film crew and actors, because I definitely had a feeling. I felt strong in terms of telling a story with images, but there's a big difference of sitting with a pencil by yourself and just being able to erase whatever facial expression you don't like and then redo it, without having to go into a big debate with an actor or an actress or a producer. And that was very satisfying, because as a comic book illustrator, you go to work every morning and everything is about creativity. It's about adding layers there's really no restrictions when you do comic books, because it doesn't cost that much to do.
That's true. The budget can be unlimited.
Yeah, totally. So it's very much a job where there's no limitations, whereas doing film, all of a sudden you have to start compromising, and you're depending on other people and what they add to the show, which, if you're open, and that's what I have learned, and that's why I have now come to appreciate directing and being with other people and creating these things in a larger group, that you also get some gifts back from them that you couldn't expect or you couldn't plan for just being by yourself. So,
well, the one thing I think working by yourself, even starting off as a comic book artist, is, and you talked about it a little bit briefly, is just finding your style. I feel like that's always an exciting moment for an artist when they take all the sum of all their influences and kind of distill it into something that is uniquely theirs.
Yeah.
And then are able to present that to the world. What was it like for you when you started kind of really locking into what was like your style?
I think it happened over many years. I did comic books from when I was 10. I sold my first comic strip when I was 10 to the local school magazine, and
Printed all over the school. So you were a minor school celebrity at that point.
Exactly. They definitely all knew that I was the illustrator and the comic book guy. Not so much because of my comic books. Eventually, I did some more erotic drawings for a school magazine, and that really got me famous because that was very Danish and explicit.
What? In a school magazine?
It was a school magazine. They had this magazine in Denmark that was handed out for free to all people who were in 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. That's basically, I think it's like high school. So this magazine was full of poetry written by the students themselves, but it was handed out in, I think, maybe 50,000 copies to all of the schools in the town that I come from. And some of the poetry in there was pretty explicit stuff, and they needed drawings to go with that. And you know how it is. I come from Denmark. We're very liberal. Mm-hmm. First country in the world to make pornography available. So no, it wasn't really a big problem. I didn't get any complaints from any teachers or anything. It would have been very different here, I'm sure.
I'm sure there.
You know how it goes here.
Yes, they're like, what is this? They're showing to our kids in the classroom.
Yeah, let's show them guns because naked bodies. That's just awful. People are gonna get sick.
Ugh.
So no, I don't want to be talk about politics, But I think people are very liberal in terms of nudity when it comes to
I'm
comes to the arts.
Yes, I'm envious. I would love to have gotten a magazine like that in high school. It would have been amazing. Have you gone back ever to look at that artwork just to see like how far you've come from then to now?
Yeah, from time to time, I would keep all of these magazines, and obviously from time to time I would dig into the pile of old magazines that I did comic books for and illustrations and smile or laugh or feel devastated that I did as I did. But
when did you actually publish your first professional comic book story?
First one published, I think, in my mid-20s. I did this graphic novel named Solas, S-O-L-A-S, in 2 volumes. The first one came out 27, but I had short stories that were printed in different magazines in Denmark, but nothing really that I could make a living off. So I wasn't living off doing comic books. I always had to do advertising on the side, storyboards or posters or illustrations for children's books. And
what I like is this the case where at least the copies that I've seen like of Tintin and whatnot are more like all the hardback version compilations of them. For your story, was it a nice hardback presentation of it?
Yes.
It just makes it seem so much cooler when it's
like
in a
real
hardback.
Book.
Yes.
The classical European way of printing a comic book.
Yeah.
It wasn't released in the way you do it here. You have
a bunch of single issues and then you collect it all.
And then collect it. Here it just came out as a book of 80 pages. That was 1 volume.
Well, I mean, I know that you've also mentioned that you are a huge fan of Akira as well too.
Yes.
So reading that, I mean, a very different type of storytelling, Japanese manga, compared to how you would do it over in Belgium and France.
Yeah.
What was it about that storyline, or just the art, or the way that it was laid out, that really just captured your imagination?
I mean, the storyline is so out of this world. It's so absolutely crazy that, and I know, and I learned that 2 years ago because No, actually last year I was actually trying to pitch for the director job on Akira. Now I believe Taika Waititi is doing it. It's hard to beat him in a pitching competition after the success of Thor.
Yeah.
But anyway, and digging into the universe one more time, it's really a bizarre universe. But obviously there are the cinematic scope of the graphic novel. It does very much read as a film, and that of course has to do with the artwork. It does very much feel like the way it's framed, the speed and the timing and the way it's paced. It's very cinematic, and but the story is also very Japanese. There are definitely things in there that doesn't translate that well, and I kind of learned that now reading the screenplay that has been done for the film. It is really difficult to translate, and it's definitely a difficult story to put into 2 hours of film. I actually think Akira would be much better off turned into a TV series. But let's see.
Yeah, that's right. There are those stories that I always feel like that if you want to adapt from a comic book, that I feel like you need that kind of that surface area to be able to kind of dig into the material.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I think when you translate these things, it goes for Harry Potter, or it goes for Lord of the Rings, or it goes for Akira. Why not just stay truthful to the source material? Because, I mean, you have to remember why you fell in love with these things. Obviously, you have to translate it into a different art form. But, I think part of the charm about Akira is it goes on. I mean, I'm not referring to the animation. Mm-hmm. I became a fan of the graphic novels, which, of course, is, I think, more than 2,000 pages.
Yes.
So I think you should just, instead of trying to cut that down to 2 hours, why not just go the full mile and open up the universe and make it just as crazy as they did back in the 80s.
Things like say Zack Snyder doing Watchmen, as faithful as an adaptation as you could do, given the 2.5 hours that he had. Yeah. But now when you see Damon Lindelof going to be doing an HBO miniseries, I feel like if you've got 12 episodes, there's so much more you can dive into from that source material.
Exactly.
So for you get more involved in storyboarding. You start working on films, working with other Danish directors. Is that a way just for you also, as you're kind of learning about the filmmaking process, but also you're learning from those different directors in terms of what they look for, the way they want to stage out a scene, the way they want to kind of block everything out? Or are they relying on you to kind of set a blocking for the scene, and I'll just kind of go by what you're kind of recommending?
I mean, I won't say names here because some of the Danish directors I worked with, you probably know, and have become international directors since. But most of them that I got to work with weren't that interested in giving me specifics. So I think for a director who wants to storyboard something, especially in Danish productions, because I'm not storyboarding to do action sequences, because we don't have that many action sequences in Danish films because of small budgets and so on. So they would most of the time they would just ask me to come up with a storyboard for a certain scene or for half of the movie or whatever, selected scenes, without giving too much input, because I think it's also a way for a director to be inspired. To just, why not tap into this guy or woman's brain and see what they can do and achieve with, that's the screenplay. And then next round would obviously be them, maybe getting ideas of what I did. And I must be honest with you, the people that I work with in Denmark, they weren't that interested in the images. Some of the directors I worked were much more into directing the actors, and they would let the photographer be the director of how to cover a scene.
That's right. I mean, I guess directors have, I guess, their strengths or their areas of more interest.
Yeah, and I do think, compared to being here, a lot of the directors working in Denmark, because most Danish films are very tense dramas and not so much depending and relying on I mean, it does sound a little awful, since we're dealing with a visual medium, but it just seemed like they weren't that much, interested in creating beautiful imagery. They were much more into the tension and what went on between characters, which is also interesting. And I think you see that when you see a Danish film from the 90s or the beginning of the 2000s, you're not going to be remembering those films for a great visual, breathtaking imagery. It's about other things. Just the fact that in the late 90s, some of the more some of the directors in Denmark came up with the dogma. Do you know about the dogma rules?
No. What are the dogma rules?
No, so Lars von Trier and Thomas Winterberg
Okay.
and 2 other Danish directors came together and did this set of rules that basically, had to do with not paying any attention to any technical aspects of filmmaking, because they really wanted to just focus on the pureness of the story. So they made these rules, and Lars von Trier made a movie called The Idiots, and Thomas Winterberg made a very famous film called The Celebration that traveled the world and became a great success. But the rules were not to care and give a flying beep about any technical aspects of filmmaking. So that says a lot about what was going on in Danish film in that period. I think that has changed now. All of these directors were very much inspired by, things coming out of Europe in the 60s and 70s. Whereas now with the directors that I'm, my generation, people who are, in their early 40s, grew up on a totally different source of inspiration, which is movies coming from here. Zemeckis, Spielberg, and all of that stuff. And not so much Ingmar Bergman and all of these other big directors out of Europe. So all of a sudden you feel, or you see a need for these directors to approach filmmaking in a much more, I would say, a much more typical Hollywood or American way of doing films. Basically just because, you grew up on Spielberg, and if you grew up on Spielberg, you are being fed with fantastic visual storytelling, opposed to, Ingmar Bergman, of course, does beautiful imagery, but it's just a totally different way of doing, using the camera and achieving poetry or achieving pace or whatever you're trying to achieve in a film. So,
for you coming up with a love for comic books, being a comic book artist, that's so much of a visual medium. Certainly, the story is important, but you need the visuals to go there. You need to make it exciting and entertaining and draw the viewer through the story. So I could see why, for you, maybe like, I really come from a visual side more so than being a little bit, as you said, a little reluctant or a little worried about dealing with human actors in the medium.
Yeah.
So for you, it is the first time you hop behind and direct. Is it for the first short film that you did?
Yeah, so I did a short film. Yeah, that was the first. No, I actually directed music videos for my dear brother that we opened the show. Opened up the show with. So that was a nice way to start to direct, because I knew my brother, I knew the people he was playing with, so I didn't feel exposed. But the first time I'm actually working with actors and working with dialogue and working with storytelling in a more classic way was 33. And then I did my first short film, and then every year from 33 to 37 or 36 I did a short film a year, and then the third one, Helium, obviously became a great success and opened up a lot of doors for me.
So I want to jump back though, as you're directing your first directorial debut with your brother on the music video. Great, because it's your brother, so as you said, low stakes. But what's it like the first time that you have to give him like a note or something like that? Is he like, get out of here, what are you talking about?
No, but it wasn't really directing, because the way I talk to my brother, if you don't know us and you come into a room and we're having an argument or I'm directing him, it just, people are really freaking out, because it does come across very aggressive and offensive, and you should definitely not talk to anyone you're working with in the tone that we're addressing each other. But people who have worked with us, over the years, I worked the same DP on my music videos, on my shorts, and now also on I Kill Giants. He's still shaking his head and going, what the hell is going on here?
That's true.
Is that directing? and is that taking directions? And
well, when you grow up or you've worked with somebody for a long time, you create that shorthand amongst yourself.
Yeah.
And so an outsider.
But you also have to think about, especially on a larger set, like I Kill Giants, you can't just address someone in that tone, and then, because it does create a certain a general. You set a general tone on a film set. So I guess I'm glad that my brother wasn't acting in I Kill Giants, because that would have made everything a bit strange.
What does Anders have against him?
Yeah.
What is he so mad? He's always.
But
so
of
mad.
course, having a Danish DP and also I brought my Danish producer who produced the film alongside some, the American producers, Chris Columbus and his people at 1492. There was definitely times when, because when things get stressed and you have long days, I tend to if I want to solve a problem fast with my DP, I tend to start talking in Danish. And
makes sense, yes.
And to some people, of course, that would come across as, I guess, a bit more aggressive. Also because we have a very frank way when we speak in Danish, and when we're speaking in English, we speak more politely to each other. So. But at least they didn't understand what we were saying to each other.
That's true. Yeah. It sounds harsh. Maybe it's not, I guess.
Yeah, maybe it's just their way of communicating.
So for you, your third film, everybody, I guess their dream is like if you get into film because you love it, but the idea of like maybe being even nominated for an Academy Award seems like wow, that'd be a great thing to have, but also seems like that's like winning the lottery or something, just kind of.
Totally.
So what's it like for you when all of a sudden you find out you're nominated for an Oscar?
I mean, the story actually starts with my second short film. I made a short film, 9 Meter, and that short film got shortlisted for an Academy Award, and that was the year before Helium. So we got shortlisted, which basically means you go from being those 150 films that the Academy is looking at. They do a short list of the 10 best films, and then out of those 10, they nominate 5. So we got onto the list of 10. So we were like 50-50 if we got nominated or not. But then we didn't get nominated, and I just felt devastated because you're so close to actually going there and having that experience. But then not making that list, you're not. You were kind of in that, loop of people talking Oscars, but you never got to go there. Mm-hmm. So I was obviously devastated, and then we went on to do Helium, and then the year after again we got shortlisted, and you're shortlisted for 6 weeks before they do the nominations. So for 6 weeks I was really nervous because I wanted it so bad this time. I just wanted to go there, and being nominated was just the dream. I didn't want to win. I didn't think about winning. I just want that nomination. And then we got nominated, and I was just ecstatic. But then, what happens? Then there's another 6 weeks before the Oscar show is actually taking place. And, crazy things happen. You get used to being nominated, and then you start to think, maybe, what can we do to do a good campaign here? And what can we do to actually try and win this bastard? And
as much as you're like, just nominations.
The weird thing is, 3 months earlier, being at the Oscars, thinking about the Oscars, being in that whole group of nominated people is almost like traveling to the moon. And then all of a sudden, and that's the strange thing I think about being a human being, how easy we adapt to certain situations. Mm-hmm. And then over a period of 3 months, from being shortlisted to being nominated and then to winning. I mean, I would not say that you get used to being nominated or winning, but it is rather bizarre how fast we as humans kind of adapt into these things that seem so impossible to be a part of. And
I guess the way you're describing it, I almost kind of equated to astronauts, like in the Apollo missions, where maybe you're an astronaut that gets to actually lift off and go into space, or maybe you get to go a little bit further and actually get to land on the moon. But sometimes you just orbit the moon and you head back. And
but it's also because people don't see the route to how you got there. And the same goes for I Kill Giants. My friends from high school go, wow. They just see a Facebook update that I directed an American feature film that is coming out here in the States on Friday, and they go, "Whoa, that's crazy! Aren't you? I mean, how are you feeling? And isn't it just like a totally crazy explosion of all kinds of emotions?" And it is. But the thing is, it has been such an arc. It has been an arc from when you're 6 and you're starting to do drawings. Mm-hmm. And dreaming about doing a comic book, and then you get to do a comic book, and then you do storyboards with certain directors, and slowly you make your way into that business, and then day by day, meeting by meeting, you kind of get used to it. So when the film is done, it's not like you went from having a dream, I want to direct an American feature film, and then 1 hour later you're standing on the red carpet. Then it would be surreal.
Yes. But you've kind of acclimated
yes,
along
but
the
that's
way.
how people see it. They got to talk to me maybe 3 years ago, and I'm like, yeah, and I'm gonna do an American feature, and then they get the news 3 years later. But they tend to not to put in all of the meetings and all of the no's and all of the rejects in between. So when you get to it, yes, you're happy and you're excited, and but the path has been long most of the time. Nothing just happens overnight.
So for you, when you go there for the day of the Academy Awards, do you write a speech, keep it in your pocket, or did you?
I did write down a speech, a short one, because we kept being told that we only had 45 seconds, and that is 45 seconds from the moment you get up from your chair to you're done speaking. And I had to share the screen time with my dear producer Kim Magnussen, who I won the Academy Award with.
And how far are you seated in the
We
theater?
were on the, I can't remember, 10th, 11th row. We were very close.
Oh, all right. That's not so bad. So you're not
Yeah.
losing too much time getting
Yeah.
up there. But it almost makes you want to run so you can get up there so you have more time at the mic to actually say what you want to say.
Yeah, but I flew up from my chair. I really did. And I just kind of, I don't know how I got from my chair to standing in the aisle. But I was standing there, and then I was looking back at my wife and thinking, oh, God damn it, I wanted to hug my wife, but then I started to think, oh, now the clock is ticking. I can't go back and spend time on hugging her and then go on the stage. So, but then Kim, my producer, the gentleman he is, he took his time to both hug his own wife and my wife, and then we went up there. No, but that was a surreal moment. That moment, obviously, you can't prepare yourself for.
Absolutely. That's got to be so cool. Winning an Academy Award, what kind of doors does that open for you in terms of what you want to aspire to do in terms of directing like a feature-length film? Does it make it easier, or just it opens up more doors, but the struggle is still the same?
It opens up doors, but I think the struggle is still the same. But the funny thing is, I said to my US agent after we won the Academy Award that now I wanted to go back and do a Danish feature. I was so scared that if I stayed in America and I got to do a feature here, that I wouldn't get to do a feature that was my voice, because in Denmark it's a different business. You're being supported by the Danish Film Institute, and they're very much pushing for the director to be the one making the decisions. And I have heard so many terrible stories about Danish directors coming here and being either kicked out of the editing room or overruled by a producer on set, and it didn't really sound like a cocktail for a first-time feature director. But then I went back to Denmark, and my US agents kept sending me screenplays to look at and to read, and just to get a feeling of what was going on here. And they were all good. I mean, I was actually surprised about the standard of the screenplays that I got to read. But then I Kill Giants came to me, I think it was the 6th or 7th script that I got to read after the Oscars. And yeah, like I said, first I saw the title and I went, wow, I really hope this one is good, because I love that title.
It's got to be something to read that script, and I imagine just kind of that feeling when you found the thing that you really want to spend the next several years of your life working towards.
Yeah.
Just is it that you can read it and you just get that feeling that,
Yeah.
like, yes, this is...
But I was almost putting the script down. I read the first 10 pages, and Barbara, as you know, is quite an interesting character, and she is definitely a sassy kind of personality who tend to push people away. And she also pushed me away almost too much reading the first 10 pages. I felt she was so obnoxious and difficult to like. But then after 10, 15 pages, then I started to care for her more and more, and then eventually, that screenplay just got to me in a very profound way, and just totally, blew me away, and I was just crying and like a little girl towards the end.
You brought up the abrasiveness of Barbara. Is that just that inherent just the children everywhere, or does it seem a little in Denmark? Would that seem a little different to see a child character acting in that fashion?
I don't think it would be different compared to a country like the US. No, I definitely recognize this growing up in Denmark and being a Dane. I think, in that regard, we have very similar cultures. So no, I totally engaged into her world, and not that I have been in a situation, similar to Barbara's, but there was just something I think because she's portrayed in that way in the beginning, and you don't know why she is holding the world in arm's length. Obviously, you get intrigued by why she's doing this, but it's also a little bit more difficult to care for her, because if you have done, like, let's say in A Monster's Call, where you go, okay, here is a young kid who is, I should be careful now not to.
Yes.
Actually, I can't.
You don't want
I
to spoil
can't go
anything.
there. I can't go
Yes.
there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we don't want to spoil anything.
No. So anyway, we don't tell the audience why she's acting out. It is, and I think Joe Kelly did a beautiful job in structuring this screenplay and just hinting and dosing it in such a beautiful way. That when you find out what is going on, it just hits you with it has double impact.
Double, yes, I would agree, because you think you know what it is at one point, and then there's another beat afterwards. So you're like, oh, it's actually what I.
And so I think
further.
actually everything that I was a little bit, those first 10 pages where I felt like, okay, am I ever going to like this character? Then because she is such a slow burn, and she is, in terms of if you kind of address it from the likability parameter, you need to be patient, and you need to kind of you need to give her a chance. And then when you decide to do that, then it just really hits you hard when you realize what's really going on.
Well, part of that, to bring that to life, you need a great actor to portray that character. Of course, with Chris Columbus producing the film, he's behind Home Alone, the Harry Potter films. In terms of helping to find young child actors that can really deliver, that's a great asset to have in your corner when you're going through the casting process. Does he give you any advice, or how involved was he in the casting process, or did he give you words of wisdom, like, if you're casting a child actor, be on the lookout for this kind of thing?
We talk, he's in San Francisco, but we got to talk on the phone a couple of times in the casting process. So, but he was very generous in terms of giving me the responsibility, and giving, I think, also boosting my self-confidence. I think being a director, and I'm pretty sure, at least I've heard stories about this. Chris doing his first films in the Hollywood system, and having producers telling exactly. So then, when you're a producer yourself, and you want to inspire new young directors like me, I don't think he knows that the cocktail is not calling me and going, okay. And so I looked at these, because Chris, of course, only came on board when we had 10 girls left. We had 600 girls. I got to see 100 of them. And then from that list of 100 girls, I took it down to 20. And then I think Chris kind of looked at the top 10. And then we got on the phone, and we were discussing back and forth which one we liked, the cons and pros. And then I actually asked him, so which one do you like the best? And he said, that's not for me to decide. That's for you to decide. It's, we trust in your vision of the film, and finding Barbara and choosing on an actress for this part is probably the most essential thing of a film like I Killed Giants. So that's for you to decide. But the good thing, the girl, Madison Wolfe, that I liked the most and wanted for the film, was also Chris's favorite. But he wanted that to come out of my mouth, and not as an order or as the almighty father, So I think he was a gentleman in that regard, leaving it to me.
I feel like that's got to be an interesting place to be in, because you as a filmmaker want to be able to, this is your film and your production, but then also if you have the opportunity to work with somebody like Chris Columbus, you want to take advantage of their years of wisdom.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can understand, but I guess you just need that wisdom to be able to say, like, let this be your choice, and it may be my decision.
I think it's wisdom is also trusting in the people you hire to do the job. Of course, if you see a director who goes in a totally different path, or you see a director who does something so obscure that it doesn't match any of the expectations or any of the rule sets that you set out to do and work within, then of course you have to step in as a producer. But I think we got, very much from the first day, and this is more me working with not Chris Columbus, but Michael Barnaton, who is Chris Columbus's producer, my own producer Kim Magnuson, and Kyle Franke, who were the producers on this, and also working with Joe Kelly, because Joe Kelly was such a big part of not only writing the screenplay and developing this, but Joe really we kept him on board, and because he wanted to stay on board throughout the whole process, and he was just a great asset for me to to be able to discuss all kinds of things with him.
Well, and since he comes not only from writing comic books, but he's done a lot of animation work as well, and creating properties as well. So understanding what it takes to adapt something from the page to the screen, I feel like that's a useful thing to be able to have.
I mean, normally in Hollywood, you know, one of the rules is don't have the guy who wrote the source material to adapt it into a screenplay. Don't go there; it's gonna be awful.
That's true, because they're too precious sometimes.
Yeah,
maybe.
and it was a very precious thing for Joe. I totally understood that, and I learned that from talking to him. But Joe, I think, was a smart man in the sense that all the deals that he did with people involved in this, right from 1492 Pictures coming on board to, you know, Chris wanted to direct this himself for a couple of years and then eventually just stayed on as producer. But all the deals that Joe did was handshake deals. Nothing was ever signed because to Joe, this was such a, and to Ken, I guess, it was such a precious story. It was a precious piece of, you know, precious artwork for him that, you know, he didn't need the film unless it was the right version of the film and the right collaboration with the right people. So he could always, you know, basically Joe could on any given day, also when I was working on it for 6 months, soft prepping the film, Joe could have said to all of us, listen guys, you know, I'm actually not feeling like doing this film anyway. I'll just, you know, keep it, you know, to the book and that's it. So there was a lot of faith involved, but when the setup is like that, you also understand and realize this is a precious thing to someone. And so Joe insisted on writing the screenplay, and he did a fantastic job. And proved everybody in Hollywood wrong, that you can actually be the writer of the source material and translate it into a great screenplay.
Well, working on a film like this has its challenges as well too, because from what I was reading is that you actually had set to shoot it in America, but things fell through. You had to look for other locations, and you ended up shooting it in Ireland.
Yeah.
What is that moment like when things kind of collapse here in the States and you have to fall back to Plan B, whatever that might be?
But Plan B became a miracle for me. That became, to me, because I moved from Denmark to America at one point when we really got a lot of interest from different financiers, and the next step was, you know, the obvious step was to come here and really push to make that happen. So I came here with my family, and right away we got a financier, an American financier out of LA, and we started to soft prep the film. And it really looked like we were going that same year and just about to go and shoot it in Vancouver. And then things happened and we didn't go. Then we tried again 4 months later in the early spring. And then again, a lot of stuff and to do these kind of independent productions, you're very depending on pre-selling the film. So first we went to Toronto, to the marketplace in Toronto in September, and tried to sell it just based off the screenplay, me as a director, partly the cast, Zoe Saldana and Madison Wolfe was attached, and a couple of other things, you know, illustration, concept work. But people didn't really put down the money we expected to buy the film. I don't think it had to do anything with the film. It was just the whole market was changing at the point. And then we tried that same recipe 4 months later in Berlin, and eventually it didn't add up, and the financier ended up leaving the film, and I went back to Denmark. And to me, it looked like that dream was just over. It wouldn't happen. But then, out of nowhere came this other financier, which was a Belgium-based financier, U Media. So we met with them in Cannes, I think. I didn't meet with them first. Producers met with them in Cannes, and they basically just looked at everything we had and said, okay, these are the conditions, these are the money we want to spend on the film, and then I think we're ready to greenlight the film. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, but what is the obstacles now? When are you going to say, but
Yeah.
we have to achieve all of these things before we can greenlight? It wasn't like that. The only thing I was depending on was to be able to convince Zoe Saldana to now come to Ireland to shoot the film, and not what we first agreed on, which was Vancouver, which is a different thing when you live in LA and you're just you just gave birth to two twin boys, and want to be close to your family. So for her to come to Ireland with the time difference and all of a sudden make that, to travel that far, was something she had to consider, of course. But that was the only but. So that became a little bit exciting for a couple of weeks, waiting for Zoe Saldana to decide whether or not she wanted to join.
Now you mentioned that because I don't think this is a spoiler. In the film, she has an infant. In the film, is that one of her?
No.
Okay.
They were older.
They were older by
They were
then. Okay.
Yeah.
But what I do like about shooting it in Ireland, it just, even though it's supposed to take place maybe in somewhere in New York, it does lend just kind of a kind of very cool ethereal kind of quality to where it's like you feel like, okay, this could take place in the States.
What did you feel like as an American?
It was cool. I mean, I didn't feel like, oh, I know exactly where this is.
No.
But I didn't feel like, oh, this is clearly not America
Okay,
at all.
no.
So it was just a very...
I was a little bit concerned, of course, because I'm from Denmark, so I want the greatest expert on deciding whether or not this location was pitch perfect. So obviously I would send all of these location photos to our American producers and Joe Kelly, because the story takes place in Long Island, very close to where he lives. So, sometimes there would be the judge of, this is too Irish, or, too something, and which was a great help for me, of course.
Well, I will tell you, Anders, I cried. I cried at the end of this film.
Oh, we got you.
Yes, you did.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm dead inside, and I cried at this film.
Yeah.
Look at you. Look what you've done.
Did you know about the graphic novel?
I knew about the graphic novel, and I'm one of those where
Did you read the graphic novel before?
My reading eyes are bigger than my stomach. It is sitting on my bookshelf along with I buy so many books and graphic novels.
Yeah.
And with the idea of like, oh, I'm going to have time to read these.
Yeah.
And then I never do. And it has been sitting on my bookshelf. So when this opportunity came along, I was like, I'm going to wait and watch the movie first just to do this and then go back and read it. So this was
So you didn't know the premise of what was going to happen in the end? You didn't expect that?
I kind of had the...
we can't, of course, talk about it.
I had the gist of it, but it's a great way about how a child just kind of copes with experiences in life. And told in a really cool, fantastical way. That magical realism. It's a really cool way to approach a story like this.
Yeah.
And bring your Kleenexes, folks. That's all I can say. Now, Anders, I know you shun social media. Like it's, you don't want to have time about this.
What is social media?
That's like, there you go. Your Twitter, your Instagram, your Facebook.
Twitter?
Yeah, what is this? That is the thing. But if folks want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with I Love Giants, the movie, where's the best place for them to kind of go on social media to find this?
Oh, there is a Twitter profile for I Kill Giants, and there's an Instagram, but
That's right.
I can't remember.
And I Love Giants. I Love Giants movie. There you go.
There you go. And I think the best place is to go to the local theater. It is very select theaters it's coming out in, and then of course go to iTunes and buy it on Friday.
That's right. Well worth the time. It's a really cool film. Anders, what else do you have coming up after this? Are you relaxing now? Or
No, not at all.
No, you're
not
back
at
here.
all.
You're back here in LA right now. You're ready to jump back into the hustle again.
Yes, I'm back in the hustle, and I'm trying to set up different projects both out of Denmark, out of London, and out of Los Angeles. So let's see which one goes first. I definitely learned one thing from working on I Kill Giants, because I put all my life into one movie, and people said I was totally crazy. They said, no, you can't do that. As a director, you need to at least have 5 or 6 projects. Because the chances of one of them is gonna go and get a green light is basically 1 to 100. But I think maybe because I was so persistent and insisting on I Kill Giants to happen, it happened. So, but now I've spread my love on more than one project.
Oh, well, I hope that it's triple the luck given I Kill Giants. It is awesome. After this comes out, everybody's going to be wanting to work with you, and deservedly so. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest has been Anders Walter, or Hannes Walter.
Ah, nice.
Yes, I wanted to get in
Nice.
my Danish before we left. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been your host, Frank Moran. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HappyGoJackie. Make sure you check out I Kill Giants, coming out theatrically this Friday, March 23rd, as well as on video on demand. Find it anywhere you can on one of those services. We'll be back with another episode of iTalk Movies right here on Popcorn Talk. Rasmus, play us out.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.